I am 29, and I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment on the second floor of a building in Columbus, Ohio. It's not glamorous. The hallway smells like someone's always cooking cabbage. The elevator has been temporarily out of service for 8 months, and my bathroom faucet drips if you don't turn it all the way off. But it's mine. I pay for it. I've paid for it every single month for 4 years without missing once. Even the month I had a $200 electric bill and a $900 car repair at the same time. I say that because it matters. It matters to understand what came after. A few weeks before my surgery, I would have told you my family was complicated but close. That's the word I always used, complicated. My mom and dad have been married for 34 years. My younger sister just had her second baby. My brother-in-law works in sales and tells the same 3 stories at every holiday dinner. We're not a Hallmark movie family, but we showed up. That's what I believed. I had known about the surgery for almost 6 months. It wasn't emergency. It wasn't cancer. It was a labral tear in my left hip. The kind of injury that sounds minor until you've lived with it for 2 years. Until getting out of bed in the morning requires a specific sequence of movements you've memorized, like a prayer. Until your physical therapist looks at your MRI and says quietly that you've been pushing through something most people would have stopped for months ago. I was scheduled for hip arthroscopy on a Thursday in March. My surgeon was clear about recovery, no weight bearing for the first 2 days, crutches for up to 6 weeks, no stairs unassisted for at least the first week, and absolutely no being alone the first 48 to 72 hours post-op. I told my mom the day I scheduled it. She said immediately without hesitation, "I'll come stay with you, don't even worry about it." That was October. Between October and March, we talked about it 6 more times. She confirmed 6 more times. My dad confirmed. My sister, I'll call her the way she's always been in my life, which is someone who means well until it's inconvenient, said she'd come by on the weekend to help with laundry and groceries. I made arrangements at work. I pre-filled my prescriptions. I did everything right. What I did not do, and I want to be honest about this because I've turned it over in my head 100 times since, is prepare a backup plan. I didn't call my friend Cassie, who lives 20 minutes away and would have come without a second thought. I didn't contact the hospital's patient services coordinator to ask about home health options. I didn't set up a grocery delivery subscription ahead of time, or move my medications to the nightstand instead of the bathroom cabinet across the room. I didn't do any of that because I trusted my mother. That feels so simple to say now. I trusted my mother. Of course I did. She's my mother. She said she would come. I had the surgery on a Thursday. My mom drove me to the hospital that morning. She sat with me while they prepped me, held my hand before they wheeled me back, and was there when I came out of anesthesia. I remember her face being the first clear thing I saw. Blurry at the edges. The way everything is when the anesthesia is still lifting, but her. I remember feeling relieved. She drove me home, helped me up the stairs, got me settled on the couch with a pillow under my leg, my phone on the cushion next to me, a glass of water on the coffee table. She heated up the soup I had batch cooked the week before and put it in a mug so I wouldn't have to manage a bowl. She was good at the logistics of caretaking. She always had been. She stayed that night. Friday, she was still there. She helped me to the bathroom, refilled my water, tracked my medication schedule on a little notepad she'd brought from home. I slept most of the day because the pain medication made everything soft and far away. When I woke up the second time, it was late afternoon and she was sitting at my kitchen table on her phone. I didn't think anything of it. Saturday morning, I woke up and the apartment was quiet in a different way. Not the quiet of someone in the next room. The quiet of empty. Her coat was gone. Her overnight bag was gone. The notepad was on the counter, but there was no note on it, just the medication log she'd been keeping, which stopped at Friday evening. I called her. It went to voicemail. I figured she'd stepped out. Maybe to get coffee, maybe to grab something from her car. I took my morning medication. I could reach those. They were on the nightstand, and waited. An hour passed. I called again. Voicemail again. I texted, "Hey, where are you? Everything okay?" She replied 23 minutes later. 3 words. On our way. I thought our way meant she was coming back. I thought maybe my dad had driven up to surprise me, to give her a break, to take over for the weekend. I thought a lot of things, and all of them turned out to be wrong. It was my sister who finally told me. She called Sunday afternoon, not to check in, I would find out later, but because my mom had apparently asked her to. She answered on the first ring upbeat, asking if I was feeling any better. A little, I said. Is Mom coming back today? She hasn't answered since yesterday. There was a pause, not long, but the kind of pause that has weight. Oh, my sister said. She didn't tell you. She didn't tell me. What she didn't tell me was that sometime Friday evening my parents had decided, together as a unit, to drive up to my aunt and uncle's ski place in Michigan. My brother-in-law's family has a cabin up there in the Upper Peninsula. It's been in his family for 40 years. Every winter, the whole extended family does a trip, and this year, it had gotten rescheduled twice because of weather. The window was this weekend. My parents didn't want to miss it. My mom had told my sister she thought I was doing fine, and basically just sleeping anyway. She said you'd probably sleep through most of the weekend. My sister told me. Her voice was careful in the way people's voices get when they're telling you something they know is wrong, but also don't want to be responsible for your reaction to it. I had hip surgery 4 days ago, I said. I'm on crutches. I'm alone. I know, she said. I have the kids this weekend, so I can't really. I'm not asking you to come, I said, which was only half true. After I hung up, I sat there for a while. The pain in my hip had settled into a dull, constant throb, which my surgeon had told me to expect. But there was something else happening in my chest that had nothing to do with the surgery. I kept looking at the medication schedule my mom had left on the notepad and thinking about the fact that she had been careful enough to track the doses, but not careful enough to tell me she was leaving. I tried to eat something. I had soup left, but it was in the pot on the stove, and the stove was in the kitchen, which required walking, which required the crutches, which required balance on a bad hip with medication in my system. I made it to the kitchen. I got the soup. I made it back to the couch. And then I tried to get up to go to the bathroom and my right crutch slipped. The rug in my hallway, one of those flat woven ones that look nice and grip nothing, had folded under at the corner. I'd been meaning to tape it down for weeks. I went down sideways, caught myself on my right hand, and sat there on the floor of my own hallway at 7 p.m. on a Sunday evening, alone, in pain, on crutches, because my family was at a ski cabin in Michigan. I want to tell you I called 911. I know that's what I should have done. I know it now. Looking back, it's so obvious. Call emergency services, explain the situation, get help. But in that moment, on the floor, I was embarrassed more than I was scared, and I kept thinking my mom would call back any minute, and I just didn't. I got myself up by dragging to the wall and using it for leverage. It took about 15 minutes. My surgeon would not have approved. I texted my mom I fell. I'm okay, but I can't be alone right now. Please call me. She replied 2 hours later with, "Oh no. Are you sure you're okay? You're so strong. I know you've got this. Call me in the morning if you need anything." Shh. I stared at that message for a long time. In the morning, I called Cassie. I told her everything. She was at my apartment within 45 minutes with a grocery bag, a phone charger, and an expression on her face that I will not forget. Not angry, exactly. Just very still and very quiet in the way people get when they're working hard not to say what they actually think. She stayed Monday and Tuesday. She moved my medications to the nightstand. She got the rug taped down. She helped me contact the hospital's patient navigator, who connected me with the home health aide, who could come twice a day for the first week of my recovery. Her name was Dolores. She was 60-something, wore Crocs every day, and called everyone baby in a way that felt like something real rather than something practiced. She was better at post-surgical care than anyone in my family had been. My mom called Wednesday. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened to the voicemail twice, standing in my kitchen on one crutch, making coffee. She said they'd had a wonderful time. The snow was perfect. and she'd be back in Columbus by Friday and wanted to stop by and see how I was doing. She sounded the way she always sounds, warm, a little rushed, already moving to the next thing. I thought about calling her back. I thought about it for about a week actually, in the way you think about things when you're recovering from surgery and you have a lot of hours and not a lot to do except think. And what I kept coming back to wasn't the anger, though there was anger. There was a lot of it. But something underneath it. Something quieter. I had been paying my own rent since I was 22. I had been paying for my own health insurance, my own car, my own groceries, my own everything. I had also, in the last 5 years, been the person my family called when something needed handling. When my parents' water heater went out, I found the contractor and coordinated the repair because my dad wasn't good on the phone with strangers. When my sister needed a cosigner on her first apartment, I signed. When my mom had a billing dispute with her insurance company that had gone on for 8 months, I spent 3 Saturdays in a row on hold with the claims department until it was resolved. None of that is remarkable. That's what families do, more or less. But I had needed one thing. I had needed one thing. For 3 days, after a surgery I'd had planned for 6 months, and they had looked at a ski trip and decided the ski trip was more important. And the part that I kept turning over, the part that made the anger go still and cold instead of hot, was that they weren't sorry. Not really. My mom's voicemail wasn't an apology. It was a check-in. She had moved on. She genuinely believed she hadn't done anything wrong. About 2 weeks into my recovery, when I could move around my apartment more easily and Dolores had graduated me to once-a-day visits, I started going through some paperwork. I need to back up a little. 4 years ago, my parents came to me with a problem. My mom's younger brother, my uncle, who I'm close with, had some financial trouble, and my parents wanted to help him out. The plan was to refinance a small rental property they owned and use some of the equity, but there was a paperwork issue. The property deed had an error that had never been corrected, something a title company had flagged when my parents tried to refinance previously. Fixing it required going through the county recorder's office and refiling, which my parents had never gotten around to. They asked me to handle it because I was good at that kind of thing. I handled it, and somewhere in the process, I'm not entirely sure how this happened, and I'll admit I didn't fully understand the paperwork I was signing at 25. I ended up listed as a co-owner on the property. My name was on the deed. I hadn't thought much about it since because I hadn't had a reason to. I had a reason now. I pulled out the paperwork. I read it carefully. Then I called a real estate attorney, not to do anything dramatic, just to understand what I was looking at. She told me, matter-of-factly and without judgment, that as a co-owner, I had the right to petition for a partition. Essentially, the legal process by which co-owners who can't agree on use of a property can force a sale. It was a legal right. It was not a small thing. I thanked her. I hung up. I sat with that information for 3 days. I want to be clear about what I was feeling because I don't want to make this sound cleaner than it was. I wasn't calculating. I wasn't sitting there rubbing my hands together. I was tired. I was tired in a way that went deeper than the surgery. Tired of being reliable and capable and easy to leave behind. Tired of being the person who handles things and doesn't make a fuss. Tired of being the one my family knew would be fine. Because I was always fine. I was fine because I made myself fine. And I was done making it easy for them to walk away. I called my mom back on a Thursday, 3 weeks after the surgery. She picked up immediately. Her voice was bright, the way it always is when she thinks a conversation is going to be easy. "I've been wanting to talk to you," I said. "About the weekend after my surgery." She started to explain. She said she hadn't wanted to worry me. She said I seemed stable. She said the trip had been planned for a long time and it was important to the family. She said, and this is the one that landed differently than the rest. She said, "You're so independent, honey, I knew you could handle it." "I fell," I said. "I fell on my crutches, alone, 3 days after hip surgery, because you left without telling me. But you're okay," she said. "I'm okay, because my friend Cassie came over and because I hired a home health aide, not because of anything you did." She got quiet. Then she said, carefully, "I don't think it's fair to make me feel guilty for taking one weekend for myself." And there it was. That sentence. I've thought about it a lot since. Make me feel guilty. As though the guilt, if she felt any, would be something I was doing to her rather than something her own choices had earned. "I'm not trying to make you feel anything," I said. "I'm telling you what happened. And I'm telling you that I've been doing a lot of thinking about the ways I've made things easy for this family for a long time. I'm going to be making some changes." She asked what that meant. I told her about the property. Not threateningly. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't dramatic. I just told her, the way you tell someone a fact, that I was a co-owner, that I had spoken with an attorney, and that I was considering my options. The silence that followed was different from the silence I'd been getting from her all week. This one had texture. "You wouldn't do that," she said. "I haven't decided what I'm going to do," I said. "But I wanted you to know where I stand." I ended the call. The next 72 hours were something. My mom called back 4 times that night. I didn't answer. My dad called twice. I didn't answer. My sister sent a long text that started with, "I'm not taking sides," and then spent 12 paragraphs taking sides. My brother-in-law, who I had genuinely always liked, sent a short message that just said, "That property means everything to this family. Please think carefully," which I actually appreciated for its honesty. By the end of the weekend, I had 38 missed calls between the 3 of them. I responded to none of them. Not out of cruelty. I just didn't have anything left to perform for them. I was done performing capability, done performing forgiveness, done performing the version of myself that was easy to leave alone in an apartment for 3 days after surgery. I did eventually respond to my dad, about 2 weeks later, in an email. I laid out what I needed, an acknowledgement of what happened, an actual apology without qualifiers, and a conversation about the ways our family dynamic had operated that I was no longer willing to participate in. I told him I wasn't interested in the property if everyone just kept moving forward like nothing had happened, and I told him that if that conversation wasn't something they were willing to have, I would need some time away from the family. My dad wrote back. It took him 4 days, but he wrote back. It wasn't a perfect letter. It had some of the classic moves, a little defensiveness, "your mother was also going through a hard time" in the second paragraph. But at the end of it, he said he was sorry. He said he should have stayed. He said he had always depended on me to be the strong one and hadn't stopped to think about what that cost me. I read it 3 times. My mom called a few days after that. She was crying a little when I picked up, which she almost never does. She apologized. Really apologized, not the "I'm sorry you feel that way" version, and she asked if she could come over. She came over on a Saturday. She brought food. We sat on the couch I had spent 3 weeks recovering on, and we had the most honest conversation I think we have ever had. I didn't pursue anything with the property. That was never really the point. I'm still in recovery as I'm writing this, if I'm being honest. Not from the surgery. My hip is doing well. I'm in physical therapy twice a week, and my surgeon is pleased with how things are healing. But from the other thing, the one that doesn't have a clean medical timeline. Cassie and I have standing Wednesday dinners now. She refuses to let me pay, which I let her win on for now. Dolores texted me last week just to ask how I was doing, and I teared up at my phone in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon because I wasn't expecting someone to ask. My mom and I talk twice a week. It's different than before. I don't manage things for her anymore. Not automatically, not reflexively. She has to ask. And sometimes I say yes, and sometimes I say I can't right now. And neither of those answers ends the world. What I know now, 3 months out from a surgery I nearly went through alone, is that independence is only worth something if it's chosen. If it's chosen freely, not assigned to you by people who find it convenient that you don't need things. I had been independent because I'd been trained to handle things, to be fine, to not make it a whole situation. And my family had gone to a ski cabin in Michigan because they knew I would handle it. I did handle it. But I did it differently than they expected. I put my name on the paperwork. I asked for help. I had a conversation that didn't end with me absorbing everything and going quiet. I didn't stop being strong. I just stopped letting them borrow it for free. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this happened. Not in a dramatic way. Just in the quiet, practical way you think about things when you're sitting with a healing hip and a lot of empty hours. Every outcome has a chain behind it. And when I trace the chain of what happened to me this past spring, I keep arriving at the same place. None of it was random. My family didn't leave me alone after surgery because they were bad people. They left because I had spent years teaching them, without meaning to, that I didn't need anything. Every time I handled something without asking for help, every time I absorbed a disappointment and said, "It's fine," every time I co-signed, fixed the billing dispute, found the contractor, managed the paperwork, I was sending a message. I was saying, I am the capable one. You don't have to worry about me. And they heard that message clearly. They heard it so clearly that when I was 3 days out of surgery and alone in my apartment, my mom genuinely believed I would be okay. Not because she didn't care about me, but because I had never once shown her what it looked like when I wasn't. That's the part that took me the longest to sit with. The honest part. Cassie came over within 45 minutes of my call. She didn't lecture me. She didn't say I told you so. She just showed up with groceries and taped down the rug that had tripped me the night before. That's what real support looks like. Not grand gestures. Not promises made 6 months in advance that get quietly abandoned. Just someone who shows up when the situation is unglamorous and inconvenient and not at all fun. Dolores, who I only knew for 2 weeks, taught me something I didn't expect, that asking for help is not weakness. It's a skill. A real one. One I had never developed because I'd been so busy proving I didn't need it. And my dad, his letter wasn't perfect, but he wrote it. He sat down and tried to put into words something that was hard for him and that mattered. It didn't erase what happened, but it told me that change is possible when people are actually willing to look at what they've done. What I've come to understand is that integrity, real integrity, not just the performing of it, requires honesty in both directions. Being honest about who you are and being honest about what you need. I had been very good at the first one and had completely avoided the second. And that absence, that persistent silence around my own needs, created a dynamic that hurt me, not because anyone set out to hurt me, just because systems, family systems, relationship systems, any system, tend to run along the tracks that have been laid for them until someone decides to lay new ones. I didn't pursue anything with the property. I want to be clear about that. It was never really about the property. It was about saying out loud and without softening it that there are limits, that I am not infinitely available, that being strong doesn't mean being inexhaustible, and being independent doesn't mean being alone by default. The 38 missed calls sat on my phone for days. I looked at them sometimes. I didn't feel satisfaction exactly, more like the specific, complicated relief of something finally being said that should have been said a long time ago. I'm still learning what it looks like to ask for things, to say, "I need help with this," without immediately following it with, "But don't worry, I'll figure it out." It's slower than I expected, but I think that's the point. The things worth building usually are.